Afternoon, thank you for joining us this April 12th. Up first today on our work session, we have the 2022 National Pike Festival event, and with us today we have Mr. Chad Walker. Chad, welcome.
Chad?
Hi, Chad.
Hello, Corporation of Hagerstown. Thanks for having me in tonight. I wanted to come tonight to present to you guys a face for the National Pike Festival. I took the Secretary and Treasurer spot over 6 years ago, and we feel it's important to get our towns involved, such as the Town of Boonesboro, Corporation of Hagerstown, Town of Funkstown, and Town of Clear Spring, so that way you have a face and connection to the National Pike Festival. I'm here tonight to ask two different things. The first thing is to ask a favor to provide, somehow to provide water for the horses at City Park. We usually stop in the gravel lot at the top of the park, and we were wondering if there was a way that the Corporation of Hagerstown could possibly help us with some portable water, so the horses would have water on Saturday, May 21st. It will be around, I think, 12:45.
Okay.
We'll have to ask. I don't think there's a water source up there in that top parking lot, so we'll have to.
Is there a way that Corporation of Hagerstown could possibly have, like, portable water if there's not a water source?
I'll find out. I can ask the Parks Department.
All right, thank you. And the second item on agenda, this year, the National Pike Festival and James Shaw Wagon Train is going to cost about $8,529.47. There is various costs that we have to put into our budget that essentially does not come out of funds from our account, such as the Washington County Sheriff's Department that travels with us. We have to include that $1,400 worth of overtime for the deputies into our treasurer's report, and essentially that comes out of a county fund. However, it's, like I said, it's going to cost $8,249.47. We are reaching out to the Corporation of Hagerstown to possibly see if there's any way potentially that they could use some funds from the hotel motel money, since we come through downtown Hagerstown, to help offset the cost for the participants' meals on Saturday night. I have presented to the Town of Funkstown. They have given $500. I presented to the Town of Boonesboro last night. They gave $250 to cover the cost of the rental van, and I'm here tonight to present to the Corporation of Hagerstown to see if you guys can assist us.
And you're asking for 500 from us?
We're asking for $500 to cover the cost of the participants' meals. Roughly, it's gonna be about $1,200 to cover all of our meals for Saturday night. You guys are more than welcome to join us Saturday night. If that's, the case, I can include you in on the head count.
And does the county provide any funding toward this?
No, ma'am. I reached out to the Community Foundation, applied for the, it was the one of the Bowman grants. I just received letter in the mail that the grant was denied. I reached out to the Convention and Visitors Bureau. We were working on a grant. I have yet to receive notification whether that grant was approved. That grant was for $1,400. The only assistance that we received this year was the printing of our trifold brochures. Other than that, it is on me, and I have gone to the local businesses and asked for sponsorships or partnerships within the community. Ultimately, we feel it is educational and inspirational to keep this event going, and Route 40 is the road that built America from east to west or west to east. It was the first paved road that led to Baltimore, and essentially it comes through Washington County. So we feel that this tradition is important to keep rolling.
I agree.
I like that, keep rolling.
I did.
So should I just direct
Keep
them to
moving.
Joe?
Yeah.
Do we
Okay.
have a water source in one of our engines that would provide?
We could certainly fill in tanks, but I was sitting here listening
again.
And where would that be?
Top of the stone lot up above City Park.
By the softball fields.
And essentially, I would have 5-gallon buckets that were donated by Tractor Supply to be able to bring the water source to the animals. Unless
there you
there's,
I'll say he'd have buckets, you just need
yeah, I
water.
would
So
have
he would have-
buckets, I just need
he'd
water.
have
Get a
buckets.
55-gallon drum.
He would have
fill it,
buckets.
And you'd have 5-gallon, get a couple of them, you have 5-gallon buckets.
Yeah,
Okay, that's our
Very kind, doesn't work on it, I'm pretty sure I can see those.
Thank you.
There you go.
Chad, is your contact information in this brochure?
yes, sir, it's on the back of that brochure.
I'll get this to you.
The James Shaw Wagon Train email comes directly to me, and then my number's on there as well.
Okay. Thank you, we will definitely be in touch then.
Thank you.
And we'll get you in contact with Jill. She's our economic development specialist on how to apply officially for the money.
Okay, and approximately how long after applying does it take?
It's September sometime.
I just would like, I figured, I just would like to make sure that I get you guys on the sponsorship banner if, you know, the funds were there available. Approximately, that's gonna take me about 4.5 weeks to have processed, so I
Okay.
understand we're, running on tight ship right now.
Okay, we'll be in touch. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'll be there.
Right up next, we have fiscal year 23 budget review.
Favorite part.
Thank you for that. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So I believe last week, Scott and Brooke, thanks to both of them greatly, covered and went over just like the basics and some very high level of the new fiscal year 23 budget to include what was included throughout the book, some of our important and key projections and assumptions that changed. So I think this evening what we want to do is just take a couple minutes and start looking at the general fund. And then hopefully between this week and next week, finish general fund and move on to some of the other funds. So first things first, one of the most important parts to the general fund continues to be real estate and personal property tax. So again, it comes as no surprise, this is absolutely, the general fund is the primary fund for the city of Hagerstown, and total property tax is always the primary funding source for taxes. So we are currently, fiscal year 23 will be our third year in our triennial assessment. The reason that that's important is that it means that all the assessments are getting ready to be redone. So hopefully, the market will stay favorable and we'll start to see some increases in assessed values. We rely tremendously on reports from the State Department of Assessment and Taxations. Again, they're the organization who does the assessments. And they give us information and they provided a constant yield notification. Per their constant yield notification, even though great things are happening in the city of Hagerstown, we're seeing growth, we're starting to see some annexation, warehouse developments. Their estimate was for fiscal year 23 to only be a 0.6% increase in our total assessed value. So in looking at our past trends and looking at those trends, there's a chart in here that shows assessed values for like 25 years. But we went back and reviewed in our third and final year what happens with our assessed values. How much are they increasing? And then worked with Scott. Scott was a little bit more comfortable saying, yes, we definitely are going to see an improvement by more than 0.6%. So we've included about 3.5% to 4%. And again, in looking at all of the new development that's occurring and all the other positives, and also looking at the amount that we received in the current fiscal year 22, we're really hopeful that that isn't going to change in the third and final year. So in section 1 in the overview, on page 4 and 5, we just have a little bit of information One is that our real estate tax rate for fiscal year '22 and in our proposed fiscal year '23 unchanged at 1.002 cents per $100 of assessed value for all properties other than apartment classifications. Apartment classifications, the rate is 1.032. And then I do not have it reflected necessarily on pages 4 and 5 because corporate personal property is separate, but it is automatically a default 2.5 times our overall rate. So it's 2.5 times the 1.002. In the middle of page 4, there's a chart, and we've highlighted home values and what an annual payment and monthly payment breaks down to, depending on house value. 150,000 was the median value of a house in this area. And at 150,000 with our current tax rate, the annual tax bill is $1,503, which breaks down to $125.25 on a monthly basis. We flip the page. So in the very front of the overview section, again, this is just really high level. The first 48 pages, we've made additional copies, and we've left them here so that if anybody joins us, they can always grab a copy. Also, we made sure, with the assistance of Wes and Eric Hastings, that this information is out there on our spotlight, because really, if you're looking for something high level and what is encompassed within this whole budget, those first 48 pages pretty much does that. If you flip the page, one of the other things that we wanted to highlight right off the bat, other than our property taxes, is two very important things that's happening. And on page 6 is the Hagerstown Fieldhouse. I know that, Rodney and John Wack from Eastern Sports Management has been here multiple times. We've had public meetings. But just pretty much, we thank Rodney. We actually just took and copied his summary document that he had available for people and put it here front and center so that it is readily available for people to see. The project overall is estimated to cost $22 million, and as of today, we're still on track and could be open by fall of 2023. So wonderful things happening. Again, this Hagerstown Fieldhouse is a 114,000 square foot indoor recreation facility to be located at the current facility and location of where the old municipal stadium is. Aside from the Hagerstown Fieldhouse, again, a $22 million project, so great things, and another indication of the great things that's happening in Hagerstown. And one of the largest projects that the city has undertaken on its own in recent years. Next in importance is the American Rescue Plan Act funding 2021. And we've had, which is on page 7 of the section 1. I'll let Brooke cover just a little bit, but this concept isn't new to anybody because I know we've had many, many meetings around our federal dollars.
So last week, I kind of quickly just touched on American Rescue Plan Act funding, but tonight I'm just gonna go into a little more detail on actual projects we have included. So in FY21, premium pay was the only expenditure. But over FY22 and FY23, we have the following projects slated for the general fund. Grant coordinator position, grant equipment, software and supplies, police body-worn camera maintenance costs, the acquisition of 32 North Potomac Street, customer service payment kiosk, 32 North Potomac Street, funding of the customer lobby renovation, fire ladder truck, Hagerstown Ice Rink, which is partial funding of the air quality and condensation unit, Public Works Parks backhoe, Office 365 implementation citywide, also phone system upgrade citywide, police fire range target system, fuel station management and tank gauge system, professional court extension, which is partial funding, and fire facilities, natural gas generator.
And just for a moment, on the general fund, most of those things have already come individually before the body and have been separately approved. But some of the things are newer and again are covered later in the budget and would be coming back. The customer service payment kiosk has not happened. We're still researching which is the most, best options there. The renovation of 32 North Potomac Building hasn't started yet. We will be coming, I think, later this month. On preliminary will be the funding for the air quality and condensation unit to happen at the Hagerstown Ice Rink. And then some of the IT updates, specifically the Office 365 and the phone system, will be slated to come soon. The fire range target system is included in our fiscal year 23 budget in the back. I'm not sure yet of the time, but those are some of the things that haven't come to you as individual. That and the fuel station tank gauge system and the gas generator. But all the rest has already been individually touched as topics here.
So that brings the total, cumulative total to 12.2 million. And then down at the bottom is a chart that lays out American Rescue Plan Act utilization by federal expenditure category. So you can see infrastructure is our number one spending category, followed by revenue replacement, premium pay, and public health.
And again, in May of this calendar year, so next month, we are anticipating that we would receive the second allotment or tranche of another 10.2 million. Next, on page 8, we want to take a little bit of time to talk about Councilmember Rucci's favorite thing, and that would be the general fund balance reserves. And on this page, first and foremost, we did the chart, because most often the question is, hey, tell me about our unassigned fund balance reserve and where are we in comparison to our target in our policy. So this chart shows actual history, a 5-year history, and as you will see, fiscal year 21, as we've talked in the past, was one of those years where we had a very large surplus due to a lot of one-time items and federal funding and grants that we had. And so we ended the year with a 38.7% and 4.6 months. The 4.6 months means if we had to close our doors today and we got no more money in the door, how many months worth of bills could we continue to pay? And the answer to that is at June 30, 2021, 4.6 months. Our policy is 17% in 2 months. And the reason why this is important, as you will notice in the next chart, for the first time, Councilmember Brucey probably will say in a very long time that he can remember that I was set before this body and did a proposal. I'm proposing that we use 3.5, almost 3.6 million in fund balance reserves. Again, unheard of, but I'm not using, by utilizing and repurposing our fund balance reserves of this 3.6 million, it's allowing us to do a lot of good infrastructure projects, and it is not going to result in us falling below our policy limits of 17%. So at the bottom of the page, you will just see the chart, and what I did was I segregated it. First, fund balance use of $495,000. So in previous years, we'd asked to spend some money, and we laid out all of the projects. Those projects either didn't happen or we didn't spend all of it. So I had another $495 that we had already reallocated to use to capital projects that were just moving to different ones. And then in the center, the fiscal year 21, you'll see of the 4.5 million that I have another 2.3 that I'm asking specifically to use in different places. And then last but not least, with the current percentage and the big projects that we have ongoing, to the point where I recommended to all of our directors when we were compiling the budget that we not include any bond issues unless it was for the Hagerstown Fieldhouse or the a new parking deck. So in order to do that, we have some acquisition of some property and some initial design work we needed to do for fire. And I'm recommending that we go ahead and utilize another $750,000 in general fund balance reserves in order to move that forward. After this, if we want to flip the page to 28, I just want to take a minute to talk about staffing, just overall staffing before we get into general fund. And this chart is microscopic, and so we've been tracking this for a number of years, and departments after this printing of this budget document will continue to track their own for whatever purpose, but we will not be continuing to track that or reflect that in these charts anymore. I mean, once a department has given up a position and it's been unfunded, the only way to get another one back is to have the approval of the city administrator, the HR director, then come before this group and have it approved. So it doesn't matter if I show it in a column and just keep tracking it or not. So again, some of the big staffing changes from when we originally proposed fiscal year '22 budget was the conversion of 2 part-time positions to full-time, 1 in code administration and 1 in support services. The additional temporary position for the ARPA grant coordinator position, and then we unfunded 7 sworn positions in the police department in order to give out, on average, about 10% increases during a wage reopener. Again, those were the biggest changes from proposed fiscal year '22 to current fiscal year '23 budget. Since the printing of this book, I think this body has added 1 additional full-time position, and that's within community and economic development area, and that is converting a part-time to a full-time. So in this chart, full-time approved for general fund was at 303.10. Why a partial is we have directors who work in multiple places, and we allocate their time across all the funds. And then in all between electric, water, wastewater, stormwater, golf, parking, property management, and all the other funds in total across the city were approved for 441. Again, 441, not that we have all those positions currently filled, but they are funded. So with that, unless there's questions over big specific items, I am going to go to the general fund and just talk through 3 charts. On page 36 in the general fund, this is just a snapshot of our revenue. So the columns reflect fiscal year '22 budget, where we estimate we're going to be by June 30th, 2022, an estimated actual column. The third column is the '23 proposed budget. And in the last column, the percentage change reflects the change from fiscal year '23 proposed budget to the revised '22 budget. You will notice at the very top, 35 million is property tax revenue and total revenue of 54.7. So about the majority of all of our, as we mentioned earlier, the majority of all of our general fund revenue is in property tax revenue, and that amounts to about 64.2% in the '23 budget. Again, with the increase in the assessed value of the 3.5%, that's going to generate about 2 million, maybe 2.1 million more than in the revised budget of fiscal year '22, but it's only 1.5 million higher than the current year.
64%.
Yes, 64.2. Unless you exclude fund balance, so if you do not count fund balance reutilization as a revenue source, then our property tax revenue would be 69.6% of the total revenue. A lot of the other areas are showing increase as well. Income and other taxes contain items like enterprise zone tax credits. The reason that we're seeing a big increase there is we have several new properties coming onto the enterprise zone tax credit, but 3 properties is really driving that, and that's 2 additional buildings for North Point and Tractor Supply. Also, admissions and amusement tax, just kind of recouping that revenue and getting it back to a pre-COVID level. Income tax and highway user, all 4 of those categories help the income and other tax line show an increase of 15.4%. And the line that reflects charges for current services, one of the items that's driving it will be a change in our trash rate, and we're looking to increase it $2.78 per quarter. Rate increases and rate changes are gonna be something that we add just as an overall topic for next week, just to kind of give everybody a heads up. There's a whole separate section in this book, section number 8, that is a user fee schedule, so you can see all of the fees broken down. It's just a really, really tiny schedule, and it's hard to read. Some of the other areas, again, big increases, appropriated use of fund balance, because at the end of the day, 3.5 million is a lot more than what we've done in the past. And then transfers from other funds, primarily that is all from the health insurance fund. And it is fiscal year 21 surplus that we are allocating back out across the funds. We'll move to page 37 and 38. So in revenue, 54.7 million is what we said fiscal year 23. And as you will see on the expense side on page 37 in the proposed budget column, 54.7 million is what we anticipate that we're gonna utilize and spend. The first chart in the expenses is just breaking it down by area. The largest portion of our expense is at the top, you can see in public safety. It is increasing, total public safety for police and just fire in this instance is 7.4% increase over the prior year budget. But that 25.3 million represents 46% of all the expenses in the general fund. So again, 46% is just within police and fire on the operating side. The next 3 largest components in expenditure categories is highways, streets, and signals. And it includes all kinds of areas, and it's looking at a 1.2% increase, so it's $3 million of the total 54 million. Parks and recreation, half the way down, you'll see is increasing, anticipated to increase 7.4% over, again, prior budget, and that's 3 million of the total 54 million. And then clear at the bottom, if you look, again, fund balance transfers. So fund balance, because it's prior year money that we made and have accumulated since we've started and been incorporated, we include it as a revenue in the budget only, because it's not new monies, but we use it to balance, so we show it both on the revenue side and on the expense side. We did break down with this chart. Below, you'll see like some of the other highlights and reasons, again, an outline for where the increases were. Police and fire, predominantly in fire, the increase is in overtime. A lot of the rest is in just increasing on the wages and benefits. The debt service is actually decreasing and lowering because we are not issuing a new bond, and we don't anticipate issuing a new bond other than for the projects that are previously mentioned, the largest schools. If we flip to page 38, it's just another way to look at these same expense categories. So again, 54.7 million is what we're gonna spend, but instead of looking at it by overall large areas, we're looking at it by total expenditure types, like wages and benefits. So of all of the categories, wages and benefits, and again, it has been this way and probably will always be this way as a service provider, but it is by far and large the largest component of what we spend our money on. So just in the general fund only, wages and benefits going to be 34.3 million of the 54.7 million, or 62.6%. So again, real property tax encompasses 64.2% of the revenue side. The salaries and benefits alone are 62.6%, so almost.
And of property tax revenue, it's only less than $1 million short of the entire revenue we get from property taxes for wages and benefits.
Some of the other, the next 3 larger categories, contracted services is showing a growth of 4.8%. And at 5.7 million, it is about 10.5% of our overall total expenditures that we do. And the biggest increases there are for trash service fees, which are why we're requesting a rate increase for the first time in several years. Credit card transaction fees, they are very high. And actually now, with the implementation of our new payment portal through Invoice Cloud, we're seeing a lot more activity. So it's not even that the fees themselves are so much higher with Invoice Cloud. The fees aren't rate-wise that much higher. It's that volume-wise now we are seeing such a huge volume increase, which is a good thing. And then last but not least, the police speed camera contract is really driving those. What we're seeing is the percentage increase in the '23 budget. And then at the very bottom, the capital transfers to other funds, increasing by $908,000 to be $2.1 million. And that is all money that is going to the CIP fund to go towards large infrastructure projects. And then again, at the bottom, you'll see fund balance transfers to CIP. So those two numbers at the bottom, the 2.1 million and the 3.5, is 5.7 million we're committing in monies out of our operating side to fund priority projects that have been identified in the capital side. And again, so much higher for a number of reasons, but one of those is going to be that I'm not asking to do a bond issue. So we had to find other ways to fund these projects in order to keep them.
Okay, then moving on to section 2, which focuses just on the general fund. Page 1 is a statement of revenue expenditures and changes in fund balance. This is a really great way to see a lot of detail in just 2 pages. So this breaks it out by revenues at the top, a total of $54.7 million in FY23. And then expenditures are broken out by department and then grouped by type. So for example, in public safety, it's not just police and fire departments, it also has code administration and signal department in there.
And that's defined per GASB, so that's how we have to reflect that here. Just want to make sure that everybody's aware.
So again, total expenditures and transfers equal $54.7 million with a $1,767 surplus. Beginning fund balance is projected to be $17.6 million minus the $3.6 million use of fund balance that Michelle talked about earlier. Comes to $14.1 million as an ending fund balance, which is 26% of operating budget less transfers, or 3.1 months of expenditures.
So even with the things that I'm proposing that we utilize in the 3.5 million of the fund balance, we would end June 30, 2023. If nothing else changes, everything in here is perfectly right, we would still have a 26% and a 3.1 months worth of supplies on hand, which is better than our policy, which is where we want to be.
Policy 17.
Correct. And I think we're out of time for this evening. Does anybody have any questions? It's a lot of information and numbers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be back next week.
Oh, we know.
Yes.
We know.
We might just come and say, hey, you cover the charts.
All right, up next we have an update on Wheaton Park Improvement Project.
Good afternoon. We wanted to give you a little briefing on where we're at with the Phase 1 improvements at the park. Remember, we had a lot of discussion last fall, had a lot of community involvement. You approved the master plan. We initiated the design in December. The design team is working away at the design of the various components, such as the parking lot, the misting pad, the plaza, some sidewalk work out to Charles Street, different things like that, and of course the removal of the residential building. So we're wrapping up those plans over the next month or so, and then we also have to route through the planning commission process and get that done as well. So I think realistically, we're looking at bidding it this summer. It's federal money, and there's always complications when you use federal money, and John's an expert in that, so I'll ask him to help us walk through some of what's going on with that end of it.
I don't know if I'd use the term expert, but yes, this one has been more of a heavy lift for the historic preservation side of things. Most of our CDBG funded projects rarely trigger what's called an adverse effect on historic property determinations from the Maryland Historical Trust. So almost every project that we use CDBG funding for, we have to send something to the Maryland Historical Trust for review. And that process got started, I think, all the way back in early December. I believe you had this project approved through vote during November. So we started that process all the way back in December, which is normal protocol once the project's approved, and we have some conceptual plans that we can send to the trust. We got the adverse effect finding in January of this year. Again, that's rare. Most of our projects don't involve demolition of structures, and the process after initial historic trust submission usually can take maybe 30 to 60 days from there, and we're wrapped up. But here, that was not the case, because again, the structure in question through the Maryland Historic Trust Review is known as a contributing structure within a designated historic district. The structure itself was not on the National Register for Historic Places or anything like that, but the actual district is listed in the National Historic Register of Historic Places. So from there, we undertake a consulting party process at the direction of MHT. I would sort of liken this process as Maryland Historical Trust is in the driver's seat, we're in the passenger seat, making sure all the federal Section 106 regulations are being followed. So that brings us to this point. We've gotten through the consultation process, and we just submitted actually today a required step is submission of the project for potential comment from, there's so many acronyms involved, the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation. That's a federal agency. What I'm hearing from MHT is they may not comment on the project, but through all of this, the bottom line, and MHT has said this from the beginning, the ultimate decision rests in the hands of the mayor and city council on the structure. So even though there's been a lot of, I guess, process and review on the historic historic preservation aspect of the property, it still ultimately falls back to this table and this body to make that decision, regardless of the consulting party input. But again, that's part of the process and outreach. We're almost through it. We're also now start concurrently working with MHT on what's called a memorandum of agreement. And again, that's been rare in my tenure here. I think we had one other memorandum of agreement project through the UIP, or at least a few different structures there. And most of that was because of the state funding, not federal. But that will likely then require some mitigation, they say, to offset the loss of a historic structure. And we're going to await what MHT recommends there. I think one of the things Rodney's looking at incorporating in the project was some interpretive markers or interpretive plaques in honor of maybe some historic figures or just in the park in general. So I don't think that was unexpected. And then there's another discussion point, I guess, from one of the consulting party comments about a historic building survey. So we're going to wait to see if MHT is going to require that or not. But we're hopeful this full process then with the CDBG environmental review and historic preservation aspects, we're projecting they should wrap up actually around the same time that Rodney should be ready to bid, because that's the other key requirement with the CDBG funding and this environmental review. Rodney, we're unable to actually advertise bids until that's all wrapped up. But again, it should parallel roughly the same timeline. And we're hopeful that we're at the light at the end of the tunnel here soon on the historic preservation side of this.
Thank you.
So in summary, we're still moving forward, and the kids will get their missing pad.
Yep, yeah, definitely, it's in phase one.
That's important.
Awesome.
If there's folks in the community that want to help put together those interpretive plaques, and some of the history and creation of the park, I'd be very interested in talking to them.
In our last discussion in December, we mentioned Mr. Steph Washington, and having a placard for him.
Yep.
But yeah.
Especially
Good idea.
pictures, if people have pictures of, folks like that, it makes the plaques that much more interesting.
Yeah, I agree.
So send them my way.
Thank you very much. Do you guys have any questions?
No, thank you both for going through all this, and I was a little nervous at first from all the email communications, but I'm glad to see that we're making progress, because we made some promises to the kids, so.
And currently, I know we'll probably come back for a CDBG budget discussion, but we do have some additional funds for some next phase Wheaton Park items in fiscal year 23 planned. And I believe it's around $125,000 to hopefully add on to this first phase, so.
Which is 300?
Yes, 318,000 minus what you're using for design, so that actually timing-wise, by the time the project's bid, it should be available in fiscal year '23.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have a public hearing follow-up for the Eklund Family LLC Local Conversion District Overlay.
Hello, everyone. So I'm here to review public input for the local conversion for Cypress, and it's again Eklund Family LLC, which was the one that he did for the dental office on Potomac as well. So this one has one dwelling unit, one office space, and then he just wants to expand the permitted commercial uses for that office space. We had no specific conditions from Planning Commission aside from they'll require a site plan for the additional parking that's proposed. And then the public input from Planning Commission was from neighbors who had concerns about the traffic impact and parking, but they thought the parking lot would help the street parking. And then we didn't receive any public input at the Mayor and Council public hearing. So I think the next step would be introducing the ordinance on April 26th and then approving it on May 24th. And then I guess it'd be effective June. Questions?
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice blazer.
All right, now we have the Hagerstown Washington County Convention and Visitors Bureau request for ARPA funding. We have with us Mr. Dan Spedden.
Good evening, everyone.
Good
Thanks
evening.
for having me today. You have before you a proposal from the Convention and Visitors Bureau to use $250,000 from the American Rescue Plan Act allocation to speed the recovery of the city's tourism industry. The American Rescue Plan Act allows for and encourages the use of the funds to assist tourism, travel, and the hospitality industry. The Convention and Visitors Bureau will use the funds to provide marketing, advertising, and sponsorship for 125-plus member businesses located within the city of Hagerstown. We have about 300 member businesses countywide. 127 of them are located within the city. The result of the work of the Convention and Visitors Bureau will be the delivery of customers to the door of our tourism enterprise partners. Visitor spending will support food and beverage, retail, transportation, recreation, and lodging. The positive impact of these tourism sectors is well documented in an annual tourism economic impact report and support over 5,000 jobs in our greater community. The Convention and Visitors Bureau will use the funds in 3 ways. Number 1, to amplify advertising in digital, print, and video, elevating the profile of Hagerstown as a preferred destination. 2, to sponsor new events and to assist the return of annual events and to help our planners resume sports tournaments, art shows, concerts, festivals, and other events and to ensure their success. And number 3, to produce professional video content, acquire photography assets, design and print brochures, and maintain and enhance mobile applications. ARPA funds, if granted, will be used for these 3 purposes only. ARPA funds will not be used to support Convention and Visitor Bureau salaries or other operational costs. I want to thank Betsy DeVore for putting together the detailed marketing plan that you see before you. And just like to know if there's any questions.
Do you guys have any questions?
Dan, has the county, given any funds?
Yes, the county gave us $500,000 from their ARPA allocation. And this money, if granted from the city, would specifically serve the city.
City's projects.
Right.
I was just hoping maybe you could speak a little bit to, we hired a new position, or we're in the process of hiring a new position who's gonna be
Right.
focused on Main Street and A&E, and you and I had talked about that and a partnership with you guys. I just thought it would be good. for you.
Sure. You've put a lot of time and energy into rebranding, refreshing Main Street and the A&E district, and you're hiring a new director of community engagement. I don't know if the title's settled on yet. So, you know, a person in that position would benefit greatly from a partnership with the CVB, and we would have some really good instant successes given this level of funding for sponsorship for events especially. A lot of event planners are a little shy about bringing their events back. They're not sure what'll happen 6 weeks from now. Financially, it's hard for them to make a commitment, so we want to step up. We want to be a bigger sponsor. We want to give them the confidence to move forward. We want to work with your A&E district and your Main Street and your new staffer to make all those things a big success.
And using the same branding that we're like, right, in conjunction?
Yeah.
I think it can get confusing sometimes, you know, when.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you guys have any other questions for Dan?
I think so.
All right. Well, thank you. We will
Sure.
put this on a future ARPA.
Do you know when
conversation
you'll
plan.
have a decision on this?
Do we have something on
It'll be
the
in
agenda
May.
yet?
It'll be in May.
Yeah, next
May.
month.
And the city did well on our visitor guide, a stunning image of the Maryland Theater. I left a stack of those over there. 90,000 of these are in print. 15,000 are being inserted into the weekender edition of the Washington Post. So we
I
hope
like
to
the
drive
color
some-
choice.
Yeah, it's pretty.
Yeah, it's nice. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, up next we have local 1540 and 3373 labor contract.
Hi, everyone. I am here to walk you through the tentative agreements that we've reached at the table with two of the AFSCME unit, or with both of the AFSCME units. I'll start with 1540. The negotiating team has reached a tentative agreement with 1540. The cost of that agreement with the 3% wage enhancements for the 3 years is $294,838. 112 and some change is out of the general fund. The rest comes from other sources. It's a 3-year agreement that begins July 1st of 2022 and goes through June 30th of 2025. Significant changes in the contract are, again, 3% for the 3 years. We did change some of the safety equipment and that sort of thing that's changed considerably over the last several years, so we've increased those kinds of things. We've also increased the shift differential slightly to keep up with inflation, and we've added a longevity step at 28 years. We've also rearranged some of the steps. Instead of getting them 1, 2, 3, 9, 14, 19, and 25, they're now going to get them 1, 2, 3, 8, 13, 18, 23, and again 28. Any questions on AFSCME 1540's contract changes? I'm happy to go through them, but I don't want to insult your intelligence. You can read them as well, so I really hate to do that if I don't have to. Okay, so I will be back during the regular session to recommend approval of the contract changes, and I'll have the contracts for you at that time. Next is AFSCME Local 3373, and the negotiating team has again reached a tentative agreement with 3373 as well. That contract as well is 3 years. And it begins July 1st and goes through June 30th of 2025. The cost of the enhancements is a little different in the 3373 contract because it's not a percentage, a consistent percentage up and down the scale. So I can't tell you it's a 3% increase. I can tell you Its cost to the general fund is about $395,429. There's an additional $164,000 in change for benefits costs as well. If you'll remember, during the wage reopener, we decreased a number of positions. This further decreases the positions by 5 additional and 1 command position. I will tell you that with the current staffing, the way the police department is, the decrease in the number of sworn positions won't impact them. We'll continue to hire new police officers as we go, and if we bust up against the manning cap, then we'll come back to you with a conversation and a recommendation. Significant changes, again, a 3-year agreement with a modified pay scale. We have increased court time from 1 to 2 hours, and we did increase field training officer pay from $35 to $75. Those were the significant things. There were a lot of small changes and a lot of adjustments in the contract language, but for the most part, those were the changes that were significant to us. Any questions on 3373? I would like to publicly thank both the group's negotiating teams on both sides of the table. These folks worked hard. They worked all day long, and in many cases got up or didn't go to bed in order to get it done on the union side. And I just want to publicly say that I thank both of these teams for all of their really hard work. We had some tough conversations, and they held right in there. So.
And just to reiterate what I said last week, it used to be we were only in a labor pool battle with police. Now we're in a labor pool battle across the board. And the only way we are going to be able to compete in the local market, labor pool market, and the only way we're going to be able to retain and recruit this generation of professional is to be competitive with pay. Now, when I say that, it doesn't mean to be competitive at pay and drive our bottom line into the ground. We can't do that, but we at least have to recognize that where we used to have, and still do, have a hard time filling police officer jobs, we're having a hard time filling technical jobs, we're having a hard time filling wastewater operator jobs, we have a hard time filling water distribution jobs. We have a hard time filling every position. And as much as we appreciate the fact that we don't want to raise taxes, if you don't raise taxes, which is 64% of our income, we have to find better ways of doing things that are not as costly. And we do that, we look at that every day, and we will continue to look at that every day, as well as looking at how this budget is put together. Your priorities, as I said last week, your strategic plan is exactly what we needed as a roadmap to guide us forward. But we are in a labor pool battle across the board, and I appreciate the fact, as much as I hate to say about Alan Largent, I appreciate his leadership with 1540. Alan and I, yeah, way back. But yeah, and I appreciate his leadership, and I appreciate HPD and what they gave up in getting to that mark. But again, we need to retain quality employees, and we need to be able to recruit quality candidates. And this goes a long way to doing that. And hopefully we'll have 1605 and IBEW in here next month to do the same thing.
Questions for me?
Thank you, Don.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Don.
And Dawn, the group did a good job too, by the way.
Right.
All right, approval to submit application for Maryland Soul Grant funding.
Maps. Thank you.
Love a map.
What's this a map of? No, I'm kidding. Always wanted to be like Frederick.
Had that conversation yesterday.
So the Maryland Energy Administration set aside $2 million in grant funding for streetlight and outdoor lighting efficiency improvements. To give us an opportunity to change out a lot of our high-intensity discharge fixtures with LEDs. We pulled a fixture count from the GIS mapping, the highlighted in yellow streets, the main streets, Potomac, Franklin, Washington, and Eastern Boulevard. Picked out, my count, about 607 fixtures to be replaced.
You talk about replacing also, added to, like down in the Hurdles, South Potomac Street, Hurdles Sub Shop area, there's 2 blocks there.
But we
We
didn't
can't-
identify any place to add. That's certainly something we can look into.
It's terrible. I mean,
Okay.
you get through there at nighttime, it's dark. With the lights on, it's dark. And out in front of 905 Woodland Way, it's dark. Just so you know.
There's cats.
Gotcha.
There's cats. Dark in front of my house too. My neighbor has a camera, always safe.
It's in the Rose Hill area, South Potomac.
Sorry.
Yeah, we'll take a look at that.
I mean, at least, you know, check and see if it's, you know, comparable to every place else. You know, I can tell you that, you know, when you're going down South Potomac Street, you get to that section, there's definitely a change.
And it could be, we do send employee out sometimes at night to identify lights that are out. So we can do that as well as a start. So,
I mean, this is,
so,
Yeah.
yeah, anyway, so the total project, we're looking at about $422,000 and change. There is a 15% contribution that goes along with that, which would put the city responsible for about $63,000. Light department will donate $44,000, so that leaves a total of 19 remaining. So I think it's be a pretty good project to get some of our lighting upgraded, and should save the general fund electric bills for street lighting a little shy of $38,000. So it is a first come, first served basis. So if you guys are willing to move forward with this, we can submit the application as soon as possible and bring it back to you at the end of the month for formal approval.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean,
Yep.
this community survey identified lighting as an issue, so this would definitely help with that, so,
Okay,
yes.
Yes.
sounds good.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you very much.
First,
Yeah, baby.
sir, you don't wanna put it
I
on
know, Nathan, you
for,
better get up there.
you don't wanna, Mayor?
Because it's a first come, first served.
Yeah, you don't wanna do a special session next Tuesday to approve it?
We have it scheduled for April 26th, but
Yeah.
Nathan mentioned that it's first come, first
Right,
served, so.
right. Do a special session
It's fine
on
with
the
me.
18th?
That's fine.
Or do you give a nod of the head that he can go ahead and apply for it, and then we
Oh,
can.
That's, yeah, once you do that, just save that, save
You're
special
gonna
session.
be applying tomorrow.
Go ahead and apply.
Scott's documents tomorrow, if you have the authority to sign,
Yes,
all right, I'll do that.
Awesome.
Now you know what you're doing.
Thank you.
anything for you, Nathan.
What's that?
Now you know what you're doing tomorrow.
Everything's ready.
Thank
I got his send.
Thank you,
All right.
perfect.
City administrator.
I got a couple of things, Mayor, and I always get nervous because I don't want to step on your toes, given some of these, but Thursday night, the 14th, is the drive-through egg hunt at Fairgrounds Park, 4 PM to 8 PM, $5 per carload, sponsored by the Parks and Recreation Department. It was so popular last year that basically this was the format that it was asked to be done in again. So I think that was a nice way to handle it. Saturday the 23rd is Rock the Run 5K benefiting the Hope Center. $25 entry fee for adults, $5 fun run for kids 5 to 10 years old. Registration starts with the main run at 9 a.m. and it's at Fairgrounds Park also. So for all of us runners like me, that'll be a great place to, great thing to do. We laughing at. The Hub City 100-miler final mile walk is Saturday the 23rd, 11 to noon. Hub City 100-milers celebrate the 100th day of their 100-day journey towards health and fitness. It's 11 o'clock at Fairgrounds Park, and it'll begin and end outside the Fit Room. And lastly, Arbor Day and Earth Day celebration, Saturday the 23rd, also 12:30 to 2:30 at the Hager House, partnering with the Hagerstown Youth Advisory Council, Antietam Conococheague Watershed Alliance, and DNR in celebration of the 150th anniversary of Arbor Day and Earth Day. First 100 to attend receive a free tree seedling to take home. And a bunch of other stuff, more info on the Facebook page. That's it for me, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Martinez?
Nothing.
Thought you were reading all your.
I was, but I
things.
got nervous.
Oh my
Good.
You.
Councilmember Bertschy?
I just want to welcome GMG Home Healthcare to Hagerstown. They had their grand opening today and kindly gave the mayor and council a huge thank you and those beautiful flowers that are sitting there. So it's rare that we can go to a grand opening and we get a present. So it was and a catered lunch. It's a beautiful, beautiful office in Mulberry Lofts, and they service pediatric to seniors in their homes if they're ill. And she and her husband are from Ghana, and immigrated here. So it's a really cool story. So yeah. Anyway, congratulations to them, and thank you for the flowers. They're beautiful.
They are beautiful.
Thanks. All I have is yesterday was Sine Die in Annapolis. It was the end of our legislative session, so congratulations to our legislators and our lobbyists that worked hard for us, and to Paul and Brenda, Senator Quarterman, and Delegate Cham. Thank you for your work. And in case you guys missed the announcement, they secured $3 million for our field house. So thank you. And with that, we're adjourned.
Yeah.
7-minute council wrap.
Hello and welcome to Council Wrap. I'm Wes Decker, joined by Community Development Manager Jonathan Kearns. I feel like we should be doing this outside today, as beautiful as the weather is, and given the topic, which is the improvements to Wheaton Park and where we stand with Phase 1 at this point in time. Obviously, Rodney Tissue weighed in on that. You were able to talk a little bit about the side of this where you have to go through and get all of the environmental okays, and somehow that translates into this historical part of the whole process, even though they don't seem to be tied together when you think of, you know, what's historical or what's historic, and then the environmental concerns, but somehow they are, I guess, when you factor in community development block grant funding. So can you sort of sort all of this out for us a little bit?
Yeah, so I'll do my best.
Okay.
So yes, in the world of the Federal Community Development Block Grant Program, all projects that we use CDBG funding for, and that's the acronym, all projects that we use CDBG funding for in this community, and that's nationwide, anyone using CDBG funding, they have environmental review protocols that they must follow when executing the expenditure of that funds or executing projects that utilize CDBG funds. So yes, it sounds a bit counterintuitive with the term environmental and then historic preservation, but in the CDBG world, what the overarching process is called the environmental review process. And the best way I would describe it is the environmental review process is trying to make sure that local CDBG administrators or any CDBG grantee is the term they would use. You're not using federal funds that violate a number of various federal laws that are the oversight of those federal laws are provided through different agencies.
Right, the checks and balances.
Correct. So the environmental review process then usually there's different levels of it for different types of projects. If there's projects that are more administrative or soft costs, like we have public service organizations that do various programming with CDBG funds that's more operational, so to speak, or service delivery, counseling for home ownership or
Right.
down payment resources or food assistance or even assistance to children for after-school programs.
Right.
They have a very light environmental review process.
Yeah, and we should mention, as it relates to this project, because I don't want to assume that everyone knows, part of what we're talking about here is that there is a building, a structure on the property at Wheaton Park. So that's where all of this sort of factors in. Is that correct?
That's probably the biggest factor that's caused a more intense environmental review process here. So I'll get into that as we go back to the environmental review process, and where I said it's ensuring that we're not using CDBG or that federal funding that would in turn violate multiple other federal agency laws and statutes. And that, again, just give some examples. Endangered species is a federal law, and part of that review, we got to make sure the project's not impacting endangered species. It's got to make sure it's not impacting wild and scenic rivers. It's got to make sure it's not impacting residents in a negative way through possibly having a project or a development near an airport.
Right. And there are many that obviously are pretty clear.
Yeah, and exactly.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, most of these compliance factors with the overall review, most of them we will never violate because some of those things are not in this area. We don't have a wild and scenic river. We don't have the airport's too far away for most of our projects to have an impact, or some of the aspects of the environmental review that could come into play is there are some things that make more sense from the term environmental, such as site contamination or toxic and dangerous substances. But again, we've never run into that in projects that I've provided oversight with this process. So again, One of those compliance factors is federal historic preservation through Section 106 of the Historic Preservation Act. So yes, what happens then is one aspect of the environmental review is we're required to send the project to the the State Historic Preservation Office. For Maryland, that's the Maryland Historical Trust. So again, all projects that we typically have, I would say more construction rehabilitation type projects, everything has to go to the through the environmental review to the Maryland Historic Trust. That's one aspect of it. And then the Maryland Historical Trust will review the project plans that we've submitted, and they will provide a comment and finding on that project. And in this case, yes, for Wheaton Park, the finding was no adverse, it would have an adverse effect on historic properties because of the planned demolition of the structure. I got ahead of myself there. Most of the time when we have these project reviews with Maryland Historical Trust, it is usually a finding of no adverse effect on historic properties, or no effect on historic properties, or no historic properties in the area. But again, here for Wheaton Park, due to the age of the structure that's in question here that's proposed for demolition, it's not on a National Register of Historic Places itself as the structure, but the way the Maryland Historic Trust, as far as I understand it, again, because I'm not an environmental, or
Right.
a historic preservation expert, or I don't operate in the world of historic preservation in general. I just know
Sure.
enough to make sure we try to always be in compliance with this process. The structure was built or constructed at a time that I guess would be an era of significance, 1931 in this
Okay.
case, and it's within a historic district. The district is itself on the National Historic Register. This can also occur if there's a historic district, if it's not on the National Historic Register, but it's eligible to be on the National Historic Register. So then that, combined with the structure and the age of the structure, considers the structure to be a contributing resource. The planned demolition basically is an automatic trigger for that to be an adverse effect on historic properties finding. So from there, what that means for this project, and as communicated to us by the Maryland Historical Trust staff, it doesn't mean you cannot move forward with a demolition, but there are more layers to the process then to ensure that we're exploring all avenues, ensuring if there is indeed going to be the demolition, there's ways to mitigate the loss of a historic structure.
Certain remedies.
Correct.
Yeah.
And the process from here is more intense than most of our other CDBG projects, where the environmental review has historic preservation that's no adverse effect or no effect on historic properties. We're usually done those processes in 30 to 60 days. This takes longer because then we have to work on potential outreach, outreach to potential consulting parties is the term, to see is there other historic preservation related organizations or entities that want to comment on it. From there, we continue to work with MHT, and we're now in the process of seeking potential comment from the Advisory Council, I believe, Advisory Council on Historic Properties, which is a federal agency. Again, they may or may not choose to comment. And from that point, we'll work with Maryland Historic Trust on a memorandum of agreement. That's been rare in my tenure here, but what that would likely look like is a formal document that's adopted by the Mayor and Council and the Maryland Historical Trust, where it lays out those mitigation factors.
Yeah.
And as I had mentioned in the meeting, most of those mitigation factors at times, it could be interpretive plaques or interpretive markers that again provide some of that history
Right.
back. So you're losing some history with the loss of a structure, but you're gaining some history, or some preserving history, I guess I should say,
Right.
through interpretive markers. Some other projects I've seen where they may say if there are unique architectural features of a property that's being demolished, they may try to salvage some of those materials. That's another way that things can be mitigated. There's all different kinds of ways that mitigation can occur. So again, that's still to be determined, but we're looking at the process still taking roughly another month or two, and that should align with the city engineer's timeline
Right.
for bidding, because we have to complete all of this before we can actually advertise the bid. When we get through the historic preservation component of it, we then have some additional comment periods that are part of the standard environmental review process. Normally, those start way back
Okay.
At the timeline compared to this project, but that will occur likely in May to June, and that's about the time I think the city engineer was looking to advertise the project bids for construction.
And is there a deadline for completion then on the project when you use CDBG funding?
There's not a deadline per se, but we are under the regulatory aspect known as timeliness. We do have to try to ensure we're undertaking projects in a timely manner. And that's, again, I think I may have already used the word counterintuitive once. That's somewhat counterintuitive because of all these processes.
Right, you're on their
So it's-
schedule
Yeah,
at that point.
you're fighting the timeline that sometimes is beyond your control.
Yeah.
Because we have to make sure we're in compliance and go through these steps
Right.
and procedures. At the same time, we're itching to get the project moving because that can impact the timeliness regulation. Those can fight against each other, but that's the hand you're dealt with the use of federal funding. We're happy to have that funding, and it's a resource that we have here available, but you have to understand the checks and balances that come with it and some of the regulatory hurdles that we need to work through.
Yeah, it can be a frustrating process just because I'm guessing that the city has vetted all of this out in the first place. They've looked at this building, they've considered all of the information that is available to them. So we start the process and then you say, hey, well, we could use some of this federal funding for this. But then when you get into that process, then you have this other entity sort of looking into it from their perspective then at that point, and that just slows everything down because it takes time for them to then look it over. And I understand that because they're making sure that nothing was missed on the other side because, again, they're all about, preserving history. So I certainly get that. What are the advantages of using CDBG funding for projects, not just this one, but projects in general?
I'd say the advantage that comes to mind right away is you're not using your local taxpayer dollars. I mean, there could be an argument you're indirectly using taxpayer dollars since it is federal funding, but you're able to utilize this funding that's out there, and it's provided to communities, jurisdictions, states across the country, and why not take advantage of it? And then maybe you can look at it in a way that you're maybe able to free up some local funds where instead of using local funds for these projects, if they're CDBG eligible, maybe it frees up those local funds for other projects that are not CDBG eligible. So that's I think, the biggest advantage. And again, the funding's there, so why not take advantage of the resource? It's just, you do have to work through some of the hurdles and make sure you're following the regulations, because it can get somewhat intense at times, depending on the project. This is, I'd say, in my mind, an anomaly with this case, because again, most of the projects, for instance, the CDBG funded or partially CDBG funded skate park, not nearly as intense of an environmental review or historic preservation issue, because there was no structures involved, and many of our other CDBG funded capital projects like sidewalks or accessible curb cuts, those things are much less intense and much more efficient timing wise when it comes to this process.
Yeah, again, I just go back to, two public meetings, certainly vetted out by city staff, looked into as deeply as it could be. I mean, everyone's saying, yep, all clear here, then it goes through, and obviously you're trying to secure funds, as you said, that don't necessarily come out of the city coffers for this, which makes sense, but then the process sort of bogs down a little bit, and ultimately you want to get to, all of those things that were agreed to in, as Rodney said tonight, the master plan for these improvements at Wheaton Park. So ultimately we'll get there, but it's just a matter of, I don't want to say jumping through the hoops, but at the same time, sort of jumping through the hoops to make sure that you secure the funding in the way that it is intended to be doled out.
Yes.
So that's, very interesting process, and one, as you said, that can be very simple at times, given what that project might be, and at other times may be a little more complicated like this one. But it sounds like this project is on schedule, as we talked about tonight, and you mentioned here. So that's certainly good news. Looking forward to that. I think it's going to be a big boost to the park. I think it's going to look a lot different, and I think it's going to be a lot more user-friendly, as Councilmember Burnett said tonight, and has along the way, has really championed this particular project. It's really for the kids and the population in that particular area. Going to be, huge for them, I think.
Yes, and it's exactly the type of project that you look for with CDBG funds.
Yeah.
Something that maximizes community benefit, something that's obviously, a public facility, is the term is used for the CDBG program, but a public facility, a public amenity, and trying to maximize the benefit of as many citizens in an area as possible for using that funding, for our local citizens and residents.
Well, I can't wait to see you at the misting pad. I'm looking forward to that.
Yes, no, it'll be, I think, our first misting pad, so yes, it'll be, and some great projects. I mean, the skate park again, I think with
Yep.
a large amount of CDBG funding budget for that, it's almost 400,000. Wheaton Park with 300 plus thousand this current fiscal year, with more likely to come next fiscal year, depending on the budget. So yes, some significant park projects and park improvements on the horizon for sure. Exciting to look forward to.
Well, thank you for your hard work on this and appreciate your time this evening.
Thank you.
And that will do it for Council Wrap. Thanks for watching, and that is a wrap. See you next time.